I was only there to drop off the sweet potato casserole. That's the thing I keep coming back to. I wasn't supposed to arrive until 4. My son had said 4 o'clock, dinner at 5, come whenever you're ready, but not too early because they'd be getting the house together. I know what that means. I've said it myself 100 times over the years. Not too early, we're still getting the house together. It means the dishes are piled in the sink and nobody's vacuumed, and you want 20 minutes to make it look like you live differently than you actually do. But the casserole dish I was bringing needed 2 hours in the oven, and my oven had been acting strange all week, running hot on the left side, and I didn't trust it with something I was bringing to someone else's table. So I called my daughter-in-law that morning and asked if I could come by around 2 to use her oven instead. She didn't answer. I left a voicemail. When she didn't call back by noon, I figured it was fine. I'd just come a little early and explain when I got there. She's always been practical about these things. At least that's what I told myself. I pulled into their driveway at 10 past 2. Her car was there. My son's truck was there. The side door that goes into the kitchen was unlocked, same as always. I've walked through that door 100 times, brought groceries in through it when they first moved in, helped my daughter-in-law carry boxes when they were setting up the nursery 6 years ago. I didn't think twice about it. I heard them before I even got the door fully open. My son was talking. I recognized his voice the way you recognize a sound that's been part of your life for so long you don't even register it anymore. The low, certain cadence of him when he thinks he knows something. And then I heard my daughter-in-law say something back, quieter, and then my son again, louder. She's 68. She's not going to live there forever. I stopped. I stood there with a glass casserole dish in both hands and the cold November air coming in behind me, and I stopped. That's not what I mean, my daughter-in-law said. I'm not saying anything about forever. I'm saying it's a 4-bedroom house and there's one person in it. Exactly, my son said. And when the time comes, that's our retirement. That's what we build on. There was a pause. She should honestly just sign it over now, my daughter-in-law said. Put it in a trust or whatever. The longer she waits, the messier it gets with taxes. She won't do that. She might, if you ask the right way, if you frame it as doing her a favor. I set the casserole dish down on the little table just inside the door. I set it down very carefully because my hands were shaking and I didn't want to drop it. I stood there for another few seconds, maybe longer. I don't know exactly how long because time does something strange in moments like that. It slows down and becomes very detailed, like you're memorizing it whether you want to or not. Then I picked the dish back up and I walked back out the door. I sat in my car in their driveway for I don't know how long. I didn't cry. I want to say that clearly, not because I'm proud of it. Not because I'm the kind of person who thinks crying is weak, but because I think the reason I didn't cry tells you something true about what I felt. It wasn't grief. Not yet. It was something colder than grief. Something closer to recognition. My son is 51 years old. I raised him mostly by myself after his father left when he was 9. We didn't have a lot. There were years when I worked 2 jobs and he knew not to ask for things because the asking itself cost me something. He used to leave notes on the kitchen counter when I got home late. Little folded pieces of paper that said things like dinner's in the microwave, and I fed the dog. And once, memorably, I fixed the thing under the sink with YouTube. He was 13. I taped that one to the refrigerator, and it stayed there until the refrigerator finally died. I thought about that note sitting in my car in his driveway. I thought, he was a good boy. I think he's probably still a good pour. I think he's probably still a good person in most ways. And I thought, that doesn't change what I just heard. I drove home. I didn't go back for Thanksgiving dinner. I texted my son around 3:30 and told him I wasn't feeling well, which was true enough, and that I'd left the casserole dish on the side porch. He texted back almost immediately. Feel better, Mom, we'll save you a plate, and something about that made my chest hurt in a way I hadn't expected. The normalcy of it. The ease. I ate cereal for Thanksgiving dinner. I'm not saying that for sympathy. I just ate cereal and watched something on television that I couldn't tell you the name of now, and I thought, I've lived in my house for 22 years. I bought it the year my son started high school, the year I finally got the promotion I've been working toward for a long time, the year I decided I was allowed to want things for myself. It's a 4-bedroom house, which is true. My son lived in 1 bedroom. My mother stayed in another one for the last 2 years of her life when she couldn't live alone anymore. The other 2 have been guest rooms and sewing rooms and storage rooms, depending on the decade. It is too big for one person. I know this. I have always known this. What I had not known was that my son had been doing math on it. The week after Thanksgiving, I called my friend. She's been my closest friend since we were both young mothers in the same neighborhood, both exhausted, both trying to figure out what we were doing. She's 72 now and has survived things that would have broken a less stubborn woman, and she does not soften things for me, which is exactly why I called her. I told her what I'd heard. She was quiet for a long time when I finished. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I don't know yet," I said. "Yes, you do," she said. "You always know. You just want someone to talk you into it." She was right. She usually is. I'd already been thinking about it for days, not obsessively, not angrily, but the way you think about something when your mind keeps returning to it even when you try to set it down. I kept coming back to the same image. My son and his wife sitting in their kitchen, not in the middle of a fight, not upset about anything, just casually talking about my house like it was already theirs. Like the only thing standing between them, and it was time. Like I was just time. I called a financial advisor I'd worked with years ago, a woman who'd helped me figure out my retirement accounts. I explained what I was thinking. She asked me a few questions, referred me to an estate attorney she trusted, and told me to take care of myself. I made an appointment with the attorney for the following week. His office was downtown in a building I'd walked past 100 times but never been inside. 15th floor, a view of the city that surprised me. I'd lived here my entire adult life, and sometimes you forget that it looks like something from above. I told him what I'd heard. I told him what I was considering. He was a careful, thorough man who asked good questions and didn't rush me. By the end of the appointment, I had a clear picture of what my options were, what I wanted to do, and what needed to happen to do it. I sat in my car afterward and looked at the city for a little while before I started the engine. My house has been my house for 22 years. The garden in the backyard took me a decade to get right. There are marks on the door frame in the laundry room where I measured my son's height every year until he left for college. And then one last time at Christmas, when he came back and stood against it laughing and said, "Mom, I haven't grown since I was 18. I have been happy there. I have also been lonely there, especially in the years since my mother died, and it was just me in all those rooms." What I realized, sitting outside that attorney's office, was that I had been staying in the house for a reason I hadn't examined closely enough. I'd told myself it was because I loved it, and that was true. But there was something else underneath that I hadn't been honest about. I'd been staying because leaving felt like losing. Like admitting that the life I'd built around other people needed to be rebuilt around just me, and I wasn't sure I knew how to do that. My son's conversation had done something unexpected. It had made me angry, yes, but it had also, strangely, clarified something. I didn't want to be an inheritance. I didn't want to be a line in someone else's retirement plan. I wanted to be a person who was still living her life. I started looking at apartments the second week of December. My friend came with me to the first few because she knows what I like, and she's ruthless about pointing out when a space is wrong. Too dark, too cramped, smells like the previous tenant's cooking in a way that won't come out. We toured 6 places in 3 weeks. Some of them were fine. One of them was quietly depressing in the way that some well-maintained places are, everything beige and correct, like a waiting room. Then we walked into a building by the river. I don't know how else to say it except that I knew immediately. The kind of knowing that doesn't need to argue with itself. Big windows. Light that changed throughout the day. A kitchen that was smaller than my current one but designed thoughtfully, no wasted space. A balcony that looked east so you got the morning. The building had a little library on the second floor, a community garden on the roof, a gym I would probably use twice, and a pool I would probably use often. I stood at the window in the main room for a long time. "Well?" my friend said. "I think this is it," I said. "I think so too," she said. "I've been waiting for you to figure it out." I put in an application that same week. Christmas was harder than Thanksgiving in some ways because I couldn't avoid it. My son called, texted, asked what my plans were. I told him I'd come for dinner. I went. His wife made a beautiful meal. My granddaughter, who is 6, showed me every single thing she'd gotten and explained each one at length with the seriousness of a person presenting research. I sat on the floor with her and listened to all of it, and that part was genuinely good. That part I will hold on to. At dinner, my son asked about the house, whether the furnace had given me any more trouble, whether I'd called the plumber about the slow drain in the upstairs bathroom. Small talk that wasn't small, in retrospect. The kind of maintenance questions that could also be read as, "We're monitoring the asset." I answered honestly. The furnace was fine. I hadn't gotten to the drain yet. I did not tell them what I was planning. I didn't tell them at Christmas or in January or in February when the paperwork started moving forward. I told my friend and my attorney and eventually my sister, who lives out of state and had a reaction that involved some language I won't repeat here. But I didn't tell my son. I want to be clear about why. It wasn't punishment. Or at least, I don't think it was. It wasn't a way of being cruel or secretive or playing some kind of long game. It was something simpler. I had learned, sitting outside that attorney's office in December, that I needed to make this decision entirely for myself. Without his reaction in the room, without the conversation that would happen when he found out, without the apologies that might come and the complicated feelings I would have about whether to believe them. I needed to do this one thing that was fully mine. In March, I signed the lease on the River apartment. In April, I met with my attorney again and finalized the changes to my will. I'm not going to detail every decision I made. Those are private, and that's the point of them. What I will say is that I thought carefully about each person in my life. I thought about what I actually knew about who they were and what they wanted and what I wanted to give them. I thought about my granddaughter, who is 6 years old and had nothing to do with a conversation she didn't even know was happening. I thought about what I want to pass forward versus what I'm willing to let go. In May, I listed the house. It sold in 11 days, not because of the market, or not only because of it, but because I priced it the way my realtor advised, and I let her do her job. The people who bought it are a young family, 2 parents, 3 children, a dog. They walked through twice and made an offer, and in the offer letter, the mother wrote a paragraph about how she could imagine her children growing up there. I read that paragraph 3 times. I closed at the end of June. I moved into the apartment on a Saturday in early July with help from my friend, my sister who drove up for the weekend, and a moving company that was efficient and careful and had the whole thing done by 2 in the afternoon. That evening, my sister and I sat on the balcony with glasses of wine and watched the river go by. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Lighter," I said, and I meant it in every possible way. My son found out because I told him. I didn't make him discover it. I called him in late June, a few days before I closed on the house, and I told him I was selling and moving. I told him I'd found an apartment I loved and that I was looking forward to a different chapter. He was quiet for a long time. Then he asked why I hadn't told him sooner. I said I'd needed to make the decision without the weight of other people's expectations in the room. I was careful with my words. I didn't tell him what I'd heard on Thanksgiving. I've thought about this a lot. Whether I should have, whether not saying it was a kind of dishonesty. I don't have a clean answer. What I know is that I didn't want the conversation that would follow. I didn't want his guilt or his defense of himself or his wife. I didn't want to be managing his feelings about my decision in the middle of making my decision. Maybe someday I'll tell him. Maybe I won't. Some things stay with you privately, and that's not a betrayal of anyone. It's just yours. He came to help on moving day, which surprised me. He carried boxes and assembled the bed frame and didn't say much. Before he left, he stood in the doorway of the new apartment for a moment, looking at the river out the window. "It's a nice place, Mom," he said. "It is," I said. He nodded, and then he left. There was something in his face I recognized but didn't fully understand. I've been thinking about it since. Maybe it was the realization, for the first time, that I had a life that was mine and not organized around him. Maybe it was something else. Maybe I'm reading too much into the face of a 51-year-old man who was probably just tired from carrying boxes. I've been in the apartment for a few months now. I have a routine that I built from scratch, which turns out to be one of the more quietly satisfying things I've done in years. I wake up early and have coffee on the balcony when the weather's decent. I swim in the building pool on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. I've joined the community garden on the roof. I have a small plot, herbs mostly, and tomatoes that are doing better than I expected. There is a woman down the hall who's 74 and recently retired, and we've had dinner twice. My granddaughter has visited twice. She calls the balcony the sky porch. Both times she has stood out there with her arms slightly out to her sides like she is considering taking flight, and I have stood next to her and looked at the river and thought, this, not the house, not the retirement calculation, not the waiting, this. I'm 68 years old. By some people's math, I suppose I'm on a kind of countdown. I'm not saying I don't know what's coming eventually. I'm not naive, and I'm not afraid of the word. But I'm also sitting here on the sky porch with my coffee in the morning, watching the light change on the water, and I am not waiting for anything. I am here. I spent 22 years in a house I loved. I raised a son in it, and cared for my mother in it, and made a life in it. And I don't regret a single year of it. But I think the thing I needed to understand, the thing that conversation in my son's kitchen taught me, as painful as it was to overhear, is that a house is not a life. And the most important decision I could make wasn't about property or paperwork or who inherits what. It was about whether I was still willing to be the main character of my own story. I am still very much the main character. And the view from this balcony is extraordinary. I've thought a lot about what that afternoon in November actually cost me and what it gave me. The easy version of this story is about betrayal. A mother overhears something she was never supposed to hear, and that knowledge changes everything. But I don't think betrayal is really the heart of it. Betrayal implies surprise, and if I'm honest with myself, truly honest, the way you can only be when you're sitting alone on a balcony watching a river with no one to perform anything for, I wasn't entirely surprised. I was hurt. There's a difference. What I've come to understand is that the things we hear when no one knows we're listening are rarely new information. They're just the information we'd been choosing not to look at directly. My son didn't become a different person the afternoon I walked through that side door. He'd been that person for a while. And I'd been finding gentle explanations for a long time. He's busy. He's stressed. That's just how he talks. He doesn't mean it the way it sounds. What changed wasn't him. What changed wasn't him. What changed was me. There's something I want to say about choices, because I think it matters. I made a deliberate decision not to confront what I'd heard, not out of fear, but because I recognized that no conversation I could have had that Thanksgiving would have given me what I actually needed. What I needed wasn't an apology or an explanation. What I needed was clarity about my own life. What I wanted it to look like, what I was willing to build, what I was done waiting for. That's a distinction worth sitting with. There's a version of strength that's loud, that confronts and demands and makes sure everyone in the room knows you're not someone to be underestimated. And then there's a version of strength that's quieter and, I think, harder. It's the kind that says, I know what I know, and I'm going to act on it in a way that serves me, not just in a way that makes me feel better in the moment. I chose the quiet version. I'm not certain it was the right choice in every way. My son and I have a relationship now that is functional and careful, and I don't know what it would look like if I'd said outright what I knew. Maybe better. Maybe much worse. I've stopped needing to know the answer to that. What I do know is this. The woman who walked back out of that kitchen door was not going to spend the rest of her life being someone's inheritance. Not because she was angry, though she was, but because she'd finally understood, at 68 years old, that her life was still hers to design. That choosing herself was not a punishment she was inflicting on anyone. It was simply a decision, long overdue, to take her own future seriously. The River apartment isn't just a place to live. It's evidence of something I proved to myself, that it's never too late to stop organizing your life around what other people are waiting for you to leave behind. That wisdom isn't just knowing the right thing, it's finally doing it. That the most important structure you can build at any age isn't a house someone else will inherit. It's a life that is entirely recognizably yours.